Hi guys, welcome back to Sacred Vedic Astrology. My name is Samantha and I am a professional Vedic sidereal astrologer. So today we are going to have a really fun but also really important lesson on Jyotisha, or the science of light, also known as Vedic astrology. So we've seen a lot about this artist in the media headlines, and she's had a pretty large career, a very positive career. She's had so much success, so much notoriety, so much fame, etc. But she's also had some energy of controversy as well in her career, which we can see so prominently in the Vedic chart as always. So we're going to go into in-depth chart analysis on Ariana Grande and how we can see the strength of her career, the benefic influence on her career. Also, she has a really interesting Parivartan yoga as well too in her chart. So we can see everything, as always, through the lens of Vedic astrology, and I think she has some of the most interesting sort of aspects that I've seen in a while in someone's chart. So we're going to go ahead. I'm going to pull up her chart as always so you guys can follow along and follow the lesson today to learn about reading Vedic charts. And I'm going to go ahead and pull it up and we're going to go ahead and get started. So let's get right into it. All right, guys, so here we have Ariana's chart pulled up, her Vedic astrology chart. Remember, we're always only doing Vedic sidereal astrology, which means true to the stars, true to the astronomical placement of where the stars are actually sitting at this given moment, right? Which will give us the most pinpointed and accurate information. All right, so let's start with her Lagna. Okay, she is a Sagittarius Lagna, which means that her whole chart is ruled by Jupiter, right? And Jupiter is the great benefic. Jupiter is the most benefic planet that we actually do have in astrology, right? In Vedic astrology. So when someone has a Sagittarius ascendant, something you will find is if Jupiter is well placed, if it's especially conjunct or aspecting another benefic like the moon, they're going to have a lot of luck in this lifetime, best believe it. I've known a lot of Sagittarius ascendants in my life, and they're always really lucky. They sort of attract this luck because they are ruled by Jupiter. All right, so we see the first house lord goes over to the 10th house of Virgo, where we see Jupiter in a very, very tight conjunction with the moon, another great benefic. Okay, so we have Jupiter in conjunction with the moon in the Hasta Nakshatra in the 10th house. So we see two benefics in the 10th house. We see the first house lord in the 10th house. So this is a career-heavy lifetime for Ariana, right? First house lord in the 10th means that her whole chart is getting ruled by her career, her public image, the way that she's coming across to the world. And because we have such a benefic influence with two benefics in the 10th house in a very, very tight conjunction, it will show us that there's a lot of positive energy around the career, around fame, around public recognition. Okay? If this was a first house lord in the 10th house with two malefics in the 10th house, we'd get a very different story, but we have two benefic influences here. And the moon in the 10th, I'm sure you guys have seen this by now because I've done so many chart analysis videos where we see moon in the 10th house of famous people, but moon in the 10th is the fame aspect in Vedic astrology. So if we get the first house lord in the 10th house, moon in the 10th in a about 2-degree orb tight conjunction with Jupiter as the chart ruler of a Sagittarius ascendant, best believe we are getting a huge career in this lifetime. We're getting success, we're getting recognition, we're getting positive energy around that 10th house of career. Okay, so Jupiter moon will show that the career is expansive, it's big, it's fame, it's notoriety with that Jupiter moon conjunction. And degree orbs are so important in the conjunction, right? So Jupiter is at 11 degrees, 58 seconds, the moon is at 13 degrees and 3 seconds. So that's a very tight conjunction. Okay. The tighter the conjunction of the orb of two planetary energies, the more that energy is affecting each other. So Jupiter is really, really aspecting that moon in the 10th house of career. All right, so there's two ways to see that there's a huge career, right? First house lord in the 10th house. two benefics in a tight conjunction in the 10th house is the second way. But here's another way as well too. So see how we have the moon in Virgo? We hop over here, we have Mercury in Cancer. Where does the moon naturally sit? It sits in Cancer. Where does Mercury naturally sit? It sits in Virgo. So we actually have a Parivartan Yoga between her 10th house and her 8th house of the career. Okay, so that means that it strengthens these houses in the chart and brings a lot of that planetary energy together. So the moon is fame, the masses, Mercury is communication, Mercury is, the speech, the voice, writing talent, writing ability, and we see a Parivartan Yoga between those two planets. So 10th house Lord in the 8th house, 8th house Lord in the 10th house. So what's interesting is a few things. One, Parivartan is going to strengthen those planetary energies. So she has a really strong energy of her moon in the 10th with the great benefic of Jupiter. And then we also see a Parivartan Yoga on top of that. So that's really potent, really powerful for the 10th house of career. But also it is strengthening that 8th house, which is very interesting because 8th house, 10th house connections will show that the career can kind of have ups and downs, right? The 8th house is a Dastana house. It's a house of change and, transformation, and it's not always the most positive house. So even though there's a Parivartan Yoga and we see a really strong 10th house, that Parivartan Yoga will show a lot of that 8th house energy is really strong in her career as well too. So what would the 8th house, 10th house connections be? It could be, scandals in her career, okay? The 8th house is the house of scandals in Vedic astrology, and she's had many of them, right? And the 8th house is also the house of charisma and sexuality, and we've also seen a ton of those themes in her career, right? So even though we see a really strong, prominent, fame-producing career, notoriety, being seen in the public and the masses, we also see that there's 8th house themes coming into the career between that Parivartan Yoga strengthening the 8th house, strengthening the 10th house connections. Okay, so we see that there are themes of ups and downs in her career and scandals and, sexual scandals as well too. Someone who had a really strong 8th house energy was Bill Clinton, and he had quite literally this really huge sexual scandal in his career and in his lifetime. So Ariana Grande went differently for her, but she did have scandals around her relationships and, cheating, themes of that are coming up, right? That's that 8th house, 10th house connections and the Parivartan Yoga, which is strengthening those themes as well too. And another thing that's interesting is we do have K2 aspecting the 10th house as well too. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, K2 throws its aspect and its 5th trinal aspect to the 10th house. So we see a big career. We see a huge heightened career for fame and benefic influence, and it's going to be a big career no matter what. Guaranteed. You can bet on it, put money down and bet that this is the chart of a famous, really fame-producing career, 100%. First house Lord in the 10th house, Jupiter Moon in a really tight conjunction, 10th house Lord Parivartan Yoga, Moon involved in a Parivartan Yoga between Moon and Mercury. This is a strong 10th house, okay? But we do have K2's aspect onto it, and we also have the 8th house aspect onto it, okay? So what do we have to see? We have to see both things in Vedic astrology. We have to see that this is going to be a huge career, it's going to be a famous career, it's going to be a positive career, but it's also going to have some of that 8th house and some of that K2 energy, which is scandals, which can be a fall from grace, which can be this more up and down sort of career as well too, right? I've seen charts where they have just no, K2 aspects on their 10th, no Saturn, things like that, and they just have a great career that doesn't really fluctuate a lot. If we're seeing things like K2 throwing its aspect onto the 10th house, if we're seeing things like 8th house Lord, 10th house Lord connections, Parivartan Yoga between the 8th and the 10th, it brings that 8th house and K2 energy into the career. Okay, so it's a big career, best believe it, but it's also a career that can be very, up and down and have its scandals as well too. All right, so let's move over to the ascendant one more time, because what's interesting as well too, she also has Neptune on the ascendant. So Neptune in the first house can show that she's, being expressed or seen through film, through photography, through television, because Neptune is the planet of film, photography, and television. And because that first house lord, goes into the 10th house, we can also see some of that Neptune on the ascendant energy aspecting that 10th house as well. All right, so then we see Jupiter, the great benefic, throwing its aspect. Let's go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 onto the second house, which enhances the finances, enhances the voice, right? She's a singer. And then we also see second house lord in the third house was Saturn in its own sign in the third. So she has a really strong Saturn. It is retrograde, which is interesting, right? But it does show still a strength of her Saturn in the third house. So second house lord in the third house can show that, the way she makes money is through third house themes, right? The third house is performing, the third house is creativity, the third house is that really creative, artistic house. And when we go over to Venus, it is sitting in her fifth house, right? Venus is the karaka for the arts. Fifth house is the house of creativity. So we see a strong Saturn in the third. We see Venus, the indication of arts and creativity, in the fifth house. And then we see the fifth house lord in the ninth house, right? And the ninth house is a really positive house. So fifth house connections to the ninth house can show really, prominent energy of fame and recognition, and really good energy around that fifth house, which is the creative, which is the performative, which is that artistic talent and good past life karma as well too. So we see a benefic in the fifth house of creativity. We see a strong Saturn in its own sign in the third house of creativity. Remember, we're always looking to third house and fifth house energy to kind of see a artist in this lifetime. You want to look to Venus, you want to look to the third house, you want to look to the fifth house, and then you also want to see some sort of connection between the 10th house of career and the moon, if someone is going to have that bigger success as well too, right? Because moon is going to be that sort of notoriety and that fame as well. Then if we hop over to her D9 of Vamsha for a second, we're going to see that in the fifth house, we have two benefics. We have Jupiter moon. Again, we see that really strong Jupiter moon in the D1 and in the D9, and it's in the fifth house of creativity, Purvapuna, good past life karma, and creativity as well too. So this is a really strong, positive energy for that Jupiter moon in the fifth house and the D9 as well too. So a really strong fifth house. And, we do see Saturn throwing its aspect onto Venus, 1, 2, 3. So there's a little bit of that, malefic influence, but Saturn can also key the career, and it's aspecting, a pretty powerful Venus in the fifth house. So it does show, some mixed things, but I would say with Saturn with Venus, can be some issues around relationships and love matters, but it's not really harming that Venus too much, because Saturn can bring this energy of like commitment and career to Venus, which is creativity. So showing us this creative career, right? And funnily enough, we see her Atmakarika is Venus, which is the arts, right? You'll see many artist charts where their Atmakarika or their highest degree planet happens to be Venus. And you'll also find with a lot of artists, their Atmakarika or their highest degree planet is Venus in the third or Venus in the fifth, the two houses of the arts and the creative. Okay, so we see a strong third house. We see a benefic influence in the fifth house. And then we also see so much positive energy in that 10th house, a really strong 10th house. So, this is a really great chart for having a big fame producing career in the arts and in the creative. All right. Now, something I find very, very interesting about this chart is we have Sun in the 7th in the Ardra Nakshatra. And so the 7th house is the house of relationships. Ardra is tragedy. And then we see the 7th house lord in the 8th house. 8th house is loss and death in Vedic astrology. And she did actually lose a prominent partner in relationship, and that was really highlighted in the media, right? So Sun in the 7th in Ardra, tragedy, 7th house lord in the 8th house, loss and death of a relationship, right? So we see that there was tragedy and loss around a very prominent and important relationship in her life as well too. Sun in the 7th doesn't always produce great results in Vedic astrology. That's what I've seen time and time again. Why? Because the sun is too vibrant. It kind of burns things out in that house. So when sun goes into the 7th, it gives this kind of larger than life, burnt out energy in that house of relationships. So sun is an Ardra, Nakshatra, tragedy, loss. Sun in the 7th already doesn't do well. And then we also see that 7th house lord in the 8th house, which is loss and death of relationships and a partner. Then we also see the Dara Karaka, or the indicator of the spouse, is Mercury in the 8th house of loss. So, you know, we see a lot of sort of malefic influence and more intense, heavy influence on her house of relationships, which we've seen a theme, right? She's had a lot of intense relationships, loss of marriage. She's had a divorce. She's had one of her relationship, her early partners die. That's that 7th house lord in the 8th house of loss and death. And also that sun in Ardra, which is the nakshatra of tragedy and loss and the teardrop in Vedic astrology. Okay. And we always want to analyze the 7th house in the D9 Navamsha as well too. So when we go over to the Navamsha, we see 2 malefics in the 7th house. We see Mars with K2. So that's not really doing any favors either for the relationship house. We do see Venus aspect, which gives a little bit of benefic influence, but the problem with that is it's a Venus K2 conjunction, right? It's like Venus is aspecting K2. So it's like Venus is aspecting K2, Venus is aspecting Mars, Sun in the 7th, that's a malefic, 7th house lord in the 8th, loss, Sun in Ardra, which is loss. So this is a chart with a lot of issues around relationships, okay? A lot of malefic influence, and her relationships have been pretty intense, pretty karmic, a lot of loss, a lot of issues there. Okay, what you'll find with sun in the 7th is they can attract a lot of relationships, but those relationships are very intense, or they kind of burn out in some way as well too. They can burn really bright, really fast, and then burn out with sun in the 7th, and then all that malefic influence on the 7th house. So we saw that really play out in her lifetime as well too. We do as well see that in her D9 Navamsha, 10th house lord is in the 9th house, which is really powerful. 10th house lord in the 9th house can show great themes of like travel, doing well in different countries, different cultures in the career. But also the 9th house is a really lucky and blessed house. So again, we see this career is really, really positive in this chart. A lot of really good influence on the career, but also a lot of really negative, malefic influence for her around relationships and partnerships. And she might even have a lot of issues with business partnerships as well too, because that's the 7th house, right? 7th house lord in the 8th house of losses, and sun in Ardra in the 7th house. Malefic influence on the 7th house in the D9 Navamsha with that Mars K2. A lot of malefic influence for her 7th house, right? So she doesn't do well in business partnerships either. She's probably had a lot of issues in business relationships, okay, which I think we've heard about and seen in the media at times as well too. That's all that malefic influence on the 7th. All right, so we can see it all, right? It's all right there. And what's interesting as well too, let's pull up her Varga. So let's pull up her D10, see what's going on there. 10th house lord is in the 8th house again, which is very interesting, right? Because we see that theme of like having some sort of, scandal or fall from grace energy that is strong in her chart, right? So it's not one, it's not the other. It's not, oh, she only has this amazing career that's full of success and fame and notoriety. And it's not, oh, she has disgrace in her career. It's both, right? It's always both in Vedic astrology when you know how to properly analyze charts through malefic and benefic influence. All right, so we absolutely can see everything that is unfolded in Ariana's life through the lens of Vedic sidereal astrology, and we see the big career, the two benefics in the 10th house, the Parivartan yoga, 10th house Lord in the 8th house, Parivartan between Moon and Mercury, which means that she's a writer. She's kind of a teacher with that Jupiter moon as well too, and that Parivartan yoga. So I do wonder if there was ever like a thought for Ariana about going into like, fields of like helping or healing or counseling, because she has a lot of that really benefic influence there as well too. So I wonder if she's like thought about that, or maybe she'll do that one day as well. That'd be very interesting to see. But overall, she has such a huge fame, producing charts and a really big positive career in this lifetime, but also some of that influence as well of like scandal in the career as well too. All right, and Sun in Ardra. Ardra Nakshatra will always give a lot of themes of tragedy and ups and downs in this lifetime. So best believe that this isn't a idealistic, perfect chart. We also see a lot of themes of ups and downs and tragedy in the lifetime as well too. 7th house Lord in the 8th house, Sun in Ardra. K2's aspect onto the 10th, K2 aspecting the moon. There is also a lot of, heightened intuition as well too in this chart. All right, and then we also see another thing that I analyze for career is also the 6th house Lord as well too. So 6th house is like our daily routines and what we do for work, and her 6th house Lord goes into her 5th house with Venus sitting in the 5th. So her work is creative. It's working with Venus and the 5th house. So creative, performing, things of that nature as well too. All right, so I hope you guys enjoyed this in-depth chart analysis and learned something about Vedic astrology, learned how we analyze charts, and how important it is to see malefic influence versus benefic influence in the astrology charts, okay? Because we can see so many various aspects of things, right? Is this a chart for fame? Yes. Is this a chart for a really positive career? Yes. Is this a chart for notoriety? Yes. But also, is this a chart where there can be a lot of scandals in the career? Yes. Is this a chart where relationships can have a lot of loss, even death? Yes. 7th house Lord in the 8th house, Sun in Ardra. Is this also a chart that is, very creative? Yes. We see it all, right? It's all right there in the Vedic astrology chart. And we are going to see, in her career, there's going to be a lot of sort of those ups and downs and scandals, but it's not going to really take away from anything because she still has such a positive, benefic influence in that 10th house. All right, so I hope you guys enjoyed. Comment, like, or subscribe for more, and I always have so much fun doing these chart analysis videos, and let me know if there's any suggestions as well too of future charts you want me to look into. The thing that's most important is that we have the accurate time of birth, and then we can really go into in-depth chart analysis of anyone, essentially, and it's so much fun, and it's so informative. All right, I hope you guys have such a beautiful, blessed day or night whenever you're watching this, and I'm sending all the love.